Food delivery wasn't my dream job, but it paid the bills. Working the night shift had its perks. Less traffic, bigger tips, but also its fair share of eerie moments. Still, nothing had ever truly scared me. Not until that night. It was almost midnight when I got an order from a house on the outskirts of town. The address was unfamiliar, tucked away beyond a stretch of empty road. The delivery instructions were odd. Leave the food on the porch. Do not knock. Do not ring the bell. Weird, but not unheard of. Some people were antisocial or had sleeping kids. I shrugged it off and followed the GPS deep into an area I had never delivered to. The house was old, barely visible under a flickering porch light. The windows were covered with thick, yellowed curtains, and the yard was overgrown. It didn't look like anyone lived there, yet the order had been placed and paid for. I stepped out of my car, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. The night was silent, unnervingly so. Even the usual chirping of crickets seemed absent. As I placed the bag of food on the porch, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. I turned my head slowly toward the window. Behind the curtain, I saw a shape, a figure, motionless, watching me. My pulse quickened, but I told myself it was nothing, just a paranoid mind playing tricks. I took a quick photo for proof of delivery and hurried back to my car, eager to leave. As I slid into the driver's seat and started the engine, I glanced at the house one last time. The figure was no longer behind the curtain. I swallowed hard and pulled away, my eyes darting between the dark road and my rearview mirror. I needed to shake this off. There were more deliveries to make, but something felt off. The rearview mirror was tilted slightly upward. That wasn't right. I always kept it positioned for a clear view of the road behind me. I reached up to adjust it, and that's when I saw them. 2 dirty handprints. Not on the outside, not from some kid pressing against my car earlier. They were on the inside of my trunk. A cold wave of fear washed over me. My chest tightened. I had locked my trunk when my shift started, hadn't I? My heart pounded as I pulled into an empty gas station, my hands trembling. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight before stepping out. Slowly, I walked around to the back of my car. The trunk looked normal, closed, secure. I hesitated before placing my hand on the handle, breathing hard. Then, in one swift motion, I yanked it open. Empty. My stomach churned. I slammed the trunk shut and jumped back into my car. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the handprints had been there before, and I'd never noticed. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. But then, as I put the car in drive and checked my mirror one last time, I saw movement. Not behind me, not outside. In my backseat, a shape, small, hunched, and horribly still. A figure crouched low behind my seat. My breath caught in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to bolt from the car, but fear had me frouncing. Then, it moved. A hand thin, pale, with cracked fingernails, gripped the headrest. I didn't wait. I threw the door open and tumbled out, hitting the pavement hard. Pain shot through my knees, but I scrambled to my feet, sprinting toward the gas station's entrance. I turned back only once. The car was empty. The door was still shut. Had I imagined it? Had my mind conjured the whole thing? I stood there, panting, staring at my own vehicle, unwilling to go back. A gas station employee poked his head out, looking at me like I was insane. "You okay, man?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Eventually, I forced myself back into my car, locking the doors. I drove home with white knuckles on the wheel, my heart hammering the entire way. The next morning, I checked the trunk again. No handprints, no smell, no proof of anything at all. But that night still haunts me, because deep down, I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the feeling that whoever or whatever was in my back seat that night never actually left. Food delivery had its creepy moments, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night. It was just past 11 p.m., and my shift was almost over when I got an order for an apartment complex I had never been to before. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but when I arrived, I realized I had never seen this place. It was an old, crumbling brick building, its flickering hallway lights casting long, eerie shadows. The order details said apartment 14BS, but there was no 14BS, just 14A and 14C. Thinking it was a mistake, I called the customer. After 3 rings, a voice answered, low, slow, and almost robotic. Just leave it by the door. I hesitated. Which door? There's no 14BS. A pause, then the same flat tone. You'll see it. Something about his voice sent a shiver down my spine. But I was tired and wanted to get this over with. I walked down the dimly lit hall, my sneakers squeaking against the stained tile. Then I saw a single door at the very end of the hallway, slightly open. There was no number on it. As I got closer, I noticed something was off. The door frame was scratched, deep grooves around the knob, like someone had tried prying it open. My gut screamed at me to turn around, but I was already here. Maybe the number had faded. Maybe this was 14BS. I set the food down quickly and turned to leave. That's when the door creaked open wider. I stopped, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was nothing but darkness. No furniture, no lights, no movement. And then I saw them. A pile of food delivery bags stacked near the door. Old, crumpled, covered in dust. Some had receipts so faded they were barely legible. I took a shaky step back. Someone had been ordering food to this empty apartment for a long time. Suddenly, a slow dragging noise came from within the darkness. My heart slammed against my ribs. Someone, or something, was in there. I turned to run, but before I could move, a pale, bony hand shot out from the doorway and grabbed my ankle. I kicked violently, stumbling backward as a figure crawled into the dim hallway light. Its skin was stretched thin, almost translucent. Its fingers unnaturally long. Its eyes were hollow, just empty sockets. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted down the hall, my breath ragged. I didn't dare look back. I burst out the front door, jumped into my car, and floored it out of there. As I sped away, I glanced at my phone. The order had disappeared from my history. No record of the address, no record of the call. It was like the order had never existed. But I know what I saw, and I know that whatever was in that apartment is still waiting for the next delivery. I've been a food delivery driver for years, and I thought I had seen it all. Sketchy neighborhoods, weird customers, even the occasional creepy house. But nothing compares to what happened that night. It was a quiet evening, just past 9 p.m., when I got an order for a house in a suburban neighborhood I'd never been to before. The street was oddly dark, with only a few flickering porch lights breaking the gloom. As I pulled up to the address, I immediately felt uneasy. The house looked normal enough. 2 stories, old but well-maintained, with a small front porch. What unnerved me was the massive front window. Behind it stood a man, completely still, staring directly at me. His face was expressionless, no blinking, no movement, just staring. I hesitated before grabbing the food and walking toward the porch. The closer I got, the more unnatural the man's presence felt. His eyes seemed hollow. My skin prickled. I knocked on the door, no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. The man didn't move. He didn't even acknowledge that I was there. Feeling unsettled, I pulled out my phone and called the number on the order. After a few rings, a woman answered. "Hi, Simon, with your food," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief silence. Then she replied, "I didn't order anything." I frowned. "Is this house number on street name?" Another pause, then, in a lower voice, she whispered, "Yes, but I live alone." A chill ran down my spine. I glanced back at the window. The man was still there, still staring. "Ma'am," I said slowly, "there's someone in your front window." Her breath hitched. "What?" There's a man inside your house, right in the front window." Silence then. In a terrified whisper, she said, "I don't have a front window." The line went dead. My stomach dropped. My hands went numb. Slowly, as if in a trance, I turned back to the house. The window was gone. There was only a plain wall where the massive window had been. No glass, no curtains, no sign that a window had ever existed. I staggered backward, nearly dropping the food. My breathing was rapid, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Had I imagined it? No, that was impossible. I saw him. I saw his eyes on me. I didn't wait around to find out what was happening. I dropped the food on the porch and bolted back to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled to start the engine. As I sped away, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The man was standing in the middle of the road. No window, no house, just him, staring. I never took another delivery to that neighborhood again.